Welcome to the PALEYFEST Fall TV Previews. I'm Debra Birnbaum, Editor-in-Chief of Gold Derby, and I'm delighted to be your host for this special conversation celebrating the Peacock's new series, Devil in Disguise, Wayne Gacy. Today, I'm delighted to welcome members of the series cast and creative team. Joining us are Patrick Macmanus, showrunner and executive producer, and series stars Michael Chernus, he plays Wayne Gacy, Gabriel Luna, he plays Detective Rafael Tovar, and Marin Ireland, she plays Elizabeth Piest. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So first of all, congratulations on the show. I watched it and I'm terrified and I feel like I need some therapy, but I think that's exactly what you were going for. So Patrick, why don't you start us out? What made you want to do the show?
You know, it's a little bit of a complicated answer to that because at first I actually was hesitant to do the show. Part of it was just simply because I'd done quite a bit of true crime prior to this and I was sort of seeing what else was out there. And the other part of it was that it was one of those stories that seems like either it was already told or that the inclination to telling the story was somehow going to lean into what is gratuitous or salacious in some way. And it wasn't until I had some further conversations with the studio, UCP and Peacock, as well as when I started to talk to who became our writing team, that I realized that actually the story hadn't really been told before. And when we first started to conceive of where it was going to go, we knew obviously that we were going to have to explore the backstory of Wayne Gacy. Knew we were going to have to explore some of the present day story, quote unquote, from the 1970s, Wayne Gacy. But it wasn't until we stumbled on this conceit of ensuring that we actually focused on the victims and the victims' families and the police and the lawyers who were entwined in the Gacy story, that we felt like there was something truly new to tell. And then, you know, once I was lucky enough to have these three fine folk and a couple of the other folks that are not with us here today say yes, and everyone sort of came on board with this concept of ensuring that what we were really going to do is do this thing that everyone has spoken about before, myself included, having done true crime, which is to really focus on the victims. And then we figured out this concept of actually telling victim stories that have no connective tissue to Wayne Gacy, no connective tissue to their abductions or their murders, that we sort of figured out that we actually had something really special. And I use that word very carefully because I have been involved in shows for 14 years. And I have, you know, been a party to promoting shows for 14 years. And when I say that word special, I truly, truly mean it about this show. What these three people have done, what our astounding group of writers have done, directors have done, is they've helped create something that I think will change the conversation about how true crime should be done. And they did it selflessly and willingly, and they were leaders on set every single day. And I could not be more grateful for the beginning, the middle, and what I hope will be a fruitful end of this show when it comes out.
For sure. I mean, as much as I said, you know, I was terrified at the top, I was also very emotional because I think exactly what sets the show apart is that you really invest in these characters and their stories, and that really makes it feel different from all the true crime we've seen before. So I'll ask the actors the same question. What drew you to this? Was it exactly that we were looking at true crime in a very different way? Michael, do you want to start?
Sure. It was early conversations that I had with Patrick where he expressed some of those things that he just said of how the writing team was approaching telling this story. And I was also hesitant in the beginning. And Patrick assured me that there wouldn't be any gratuitous violence depicted on screen, which also felt like something different for this kind of show. And so some of my initial conversations with Patrick really allayed some of my fears about stepping into this role. And then just an impulse to want to really try to honor the story of these victims and the victims' families in a way that felt like hadn't been done before.
Marin, what about for you? What drew you to the project?
Yeah, I mean, besides talking to Patrick, I've known Michael Chernus for what feels like my entire life, but really my entire career. And he called me right away when I was sort of thinking about the idea and talking to Patrick, and he called me and talked to me for a long time about why he said yes. And I trust Michael. I believe in his integrity as an artist so profoundly that I knew if he was playing this role, then there was going to be a very special atmosphere on set and a really careful attitude towards all of these details. So I knew that if he signed on to this, that I could trust what Patrick was saying, and it wasn't just the usual TV guy stuff that I was getting. I know none of you know what I'm talking about, but yeah. But yeah, and I didn't I knew some of the other people involved as well, but honestly, the fact that Chernus was at the center of the thing really helped me have trust that this was going to kind of continue down a really I mean, I would say a very beautiful path, this project. We all felt really lucky and privileged to get to sort of bring light to a lot of the stories of a lot of these young people.
And Gabriel, what about for you?
Oh, well, Patrick came to me with the part, and I had a meeting with Patrick, and it was quickly evident that he had a different slant that he was going to be approaching it with. Whatever concerns that Michael, Marin, myself, anyone had, I think what we really wanted to know was that we weren't going to tread the same ground, that it was going to be a kind of really kind of full and complete approach to what that story is. And then after I read the first 3 scripts, I was pretty certain that that was the case. And then it also helped that they told me Michael Chernus was playing John Wayne Gacy, because he's a really wonderful actor, and he's worked with so many of my friends. And I got calls from, once I decided to do it, just the waves of calls came in, and Paul Walter Hauser and Britt Lauer and everybody just like, dude, this guy's great. And I was like, well, I can't wait to work with him. And from day one on, it was the proof was in the pudding. But I did, I as we all did, had our concerns. But as we got into the process, it was unfolding in this kind of miraculous way. Just the things, the trials of the shoot. We were all able to kind of bear those together. Things would happen at every turn that really reinforced why we were doing it. And it, that, when those signs kind of, I've had several productions where that was the case, where that happened, where there were these waypoints that we would cross, that we'd realize that something great was happening. And I'm glad I took this journey, and I'm glad that I had those early conversations, and to establish what the target was, and however winding our paths towards that end, I think we achieved what we set out to do. And it was a really, considering the subject matter, a really fruitful experience for me.
The performance that Gabe delivers is just astounding, and the detail he brings to this role, and just the subtle human choices he makes. Some of my favorite scenes we have, without spoiling anything, towards the end of the series, we have these scenes in the back of a car. Well, I'm in the back of the car, he's in the front of the car, and there's some of my favorite scenes in the whole show. We were so lucky with this cast. Gabriel and Marin, and then Michael Angarano and Chris Sullivan and James Badge Dale, but then all of our supporting actors down the line, guest stars, day players. It was truly unbelievable. The entire team that Patrick and all the producers put together was just, it was extraordinary. And there wasn't a bad personality or an ego in the bunch. Like, it was truly such difficult subject matter, but to show up to work every day was such a joy, because everyone was just so open and kind, and just leading with like love on this one.
Well, those all you New York cats are a different breed, and I think that's what built this kind of company that we walk together through this as a company.
Patrick, I'll bring it back to you. I mean, it seems like
Sure.
you had a tremendous amount of research going into this. How important was that for you? Where did you even begin to start?
Yes, it was an immense amount of research, and it all really began with NBC News. Quite frankly, they were the ones that did the extraordinary documentary on Peacock. It really was eye-opening, that one, because I had never actually really seen interviews with Gacy on camera until I saw that, and it was a chilling documentary. Um, but we knew that we sort of had to, because of the conceit of focusing on victims, families, police, and the lawyers, we knew we had to keep stepping that out a little bit. And there's a gentleman named Patrick Murphy who I've worked with on multiple shows over the course of the last 6 years or so, who is a kind of like our private researcher for our production company. And he dug through not just all of the thousands of pages of stuff that NBC News had, the research they had, but outside research as well, outside books. He actually also went to Chicago and went into the vault, the evidence vault, and held physical evidence from the Gacy trial to help sort of expand our story. He dug into all of the stories of the victims and their backstories to help us sort of expand on that side of it. And you know, you're never going to. This is inspired by, right? And so we were constantly in search of the spirit of the story and ensuring that we were paying as much truth to our characters' journeys as we could. And I feel like we did a pretty good job of adhering to that over the course of the 8 episodes. And that, it wasn't just me. I mean, our writers were researching the hell out of this. And then again, I keep doing this little L shape with the actors who are here, but they each sort of became private experts in their characters themselves. And there were multiple times on set, multiple times at script stage, in which we had conversations in which they sort of corrected my perspective on things. And when I say that it was a team effort to try to get the spirit of this story as correctly as we could, it really was. It was an evolving process to ensure that we were getting it as right as we could.
I'd love to hear the actors talk about it.
I will say that there isn't a ton of information out there about the Piest's family. We sort of, grabbed onto whatever was out there. And I remember I had a conversation with Cricket Brown, who plays Carrie, my daughter, and we talked about the fact that we didn't have as much sort of to go on, and we weren't really sort of playing the people per se. And I remember telling her that to me, it felt like because there isn't a lot out there, that felt to me like they were very private. They have become a very private family since being sort of thrust into the spotlight in such a traumatic way. And I remember telling her that there's a way in which I felt like because we weren't playing like them, that we were protecting their privacy a little bit. It felt a little bit like we were actually able to sort of create people who were going through something very horrific and horrible. And I found myself in terms of research, once I sort of touched on the things available to me, I found myself reading just a lot of books written by people who had lost a child or had suffered some sudden grief and how they sort of moved through that over time, to sort of learn about different people's particular experiences and how different they were relative to my own experiences of things like that. And that was really what kind of, I felt like the story that I was really telling was the story of someone who lost her child in a very sudden and horrific and public way. And Cricket and I sort of felt a little bit, I don't know, kind of comforted by the fact that maybe we were offering a little bit of privacy to the Piest themselves.
Michael, what about for you? Obviously, we all have an image or think we know John Wayne Gacy. How did you make it your own?
In the end, I don't know if I made it my own per se. I think I it was a daunting task. I tried to do as much research as humanly possible because I felt like going in, I needed to know everything that I could find in order to then kind of pick and choose what was useful for the making of our show and the crafting of this version of this character. So I read all the books and listened to all the podcasts and watched all the documentaries and the YouTube videos and went down every rabbit hole I could on the internet. And then we had this incredible research department on the show, and we had our own Dropbox full of just so many documents that are not public and so it reached a point where I was just, before we had even gotten to Toronto to start shooting, where I was just so full of information that I was having a hard time knowing how to begin. And Patrick eventually had to say to me, there are these scripts that we wrote that you could start to focus on as opposed to reading all these books. And so there was a point where I really had to step away from the research because that felt like it was just an endless path. And there are so many different perspectives on this story and on this terrible man. And, I wanted to know everything that I possibly could on some level because I think it was scary to just take the leap forward and sort of have to become him on camera. And so then as we got closer to shooting, I was watching more and more footage of him and listening to his voice. And I really think once I put on the costume and I have a mustache for a lot of it, and that sort of just exterior work of, getting my hair cut like his, that really kind of forced me into some kind of physical characterization. And then I think in the beginning, I was really scared to embody him fully because we have been so focused on telling the story of the victims. And I had the daunting task of playing this guy. And eventually someone said to me, I don't remember who it was, but like, in order to tell this story fully, you have to embody him fully. Like, to honor the victims, you have to show how charming he could be or how convincing he could be so that we understand why they got in that car with him or why they took that job at PDM, why they were at his house, drinking with him and were in that vulnerable position. And so it was this strange experience of this guy who, by most accounts, was very jovial and friendly until you were alone with him and this other side of him came out. Early on, I had this feeling of like, am I too likable? Am I too friendly? Am I too charming? And then I had to eventually just give over to like, that's the thing of how he was able to get away with this for so long.
Did I just piggyback on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
I just wanted to say, like, it's interesting that he says that because that was the exact journey that the writers had to take. It's the same journey that I had to take. Like, you could not, like, the writers on the very first day after reading the pilot, these are writers I've worked with for some of them over 10 years. Like, we're like, this isn't true. Like, this is too much, right? Like, why he can't be this way. And the further that they fell in the rabbit hole that I had fallen down, that he eventually fell down, of exploring who John Wayne Gacy was, it was that affability that seems just impossible to connect to the atrocities that he actually performed. And it is going to take a second for audiences, I think, to fully understand what Chernus is doing with this performance, because it is as close as we could possibly imagine to who Gacy was based on everything that we've watched and researched. It's what makes him be set apart from these other stories in many ways of serial killers.
it was a line that really struck me when I was watching it when he says, well, everyone loves a clown. And it just sort of, and it's not said in any kind of creepy kind of like, I'm going to lure people in way. It's just sort of like this, again, to your point about affability, like this is just who he was.
If you make it, I mean, if you make it obvious why somebody that he, if you make anybody a monster like that from the outset, then it's condescending to the victims that they fell for something that everybody else
Right.
can see. In the same way that anybody who's an abuser or who might assault somebody, if you could see it from a distance, nobody would go on a date with that person. Nobody would step into that car. And that's part of the story of this also. It's like we think we know, we think we can see this before it's going to happen, and that's part of why we feel this way about victims a lot of the time. Why would they do that? It's very important that that element was highlighted. It's crucial, I think.
I think, from Tovar's perspective, it was a matter of restoring humanity to these kids. We knew who did it. He told us himself. He couldn't help himself, and I think that's kind of that Michael depicts that brilliantly throughout when he's engaging with the detectives and breaking bread with them and sharing beers and just telling them pretty matter of factly kind of his world that he's creating for himself. And I think Tovar is has this dogged pursuit of not the whodunit of it all, but the who were they of it all. And it's really special the way our writers' room was able to materialize these experiences for these young people. And I truly love the way it is kind of unveiled for the audience, and the lens and the filters through which we watch these experiences. I think you watch Detective Tovar and Badge as Kaz and the rest of the cast who play the law enforcement side of it. You feel the weight of that experience. I did most of what the research I did was into the physical sensation of it all, and the visceral, the smells and of that environment of working in that tomb day in and day out. And it's just so dark, and I love the way we kind of show that. And most of it plays out in these really kind of stark, kind of proscenium, almost kind of like dollhouse. We're in this world that he kind of built for himself and for others, and then we get to kind of go and be with these victims and experience their lives through this really beautiful, florid, these worlds full of light and potential. And I love the way that we handle the balance between the two. But from the law enforcement perspective, it's just rising to one's duty when so many failed for years and years and years.
This is still tough material. I'm curious for the actors and certainly for Patrick too. Was there one scene that was particularly tough that you were worried about filming? That, what was the hardest moment for you? Marin, do you want to start?
Oh boy. I don't know that I had an easy moment.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, even some of the days I thought would be a little bit easier weren't. So I think I think for me it was a question of trying to remain open and available to the fact that the grief continues to have its own relationship over time to the people going through it. So I just kept trying to not put too much pressure on myself to experience any scene a particular way. But I have to say, I said this to Chernus a few times too. I really felt, I don't know if I felt like the presence of something around us that made me feel really, it felt very immediate to me. And I felt like yeah, I had a very immediate experience with it all, but it was, I don't think I had an easy day on set. It was very pleasant to be around these wonderful people, and they all held me very close, but I didn't have any easy days. That's for sure.
Michael, what about for you?
Um, there were a number of days that were particularly difficult, but in one of the later episodes, there's kind of this montage of when Gacy really just kind of is at his most active in terms of not only killing but cruising and grooming and abusing, and so there are just these cuts of me as John Gacy picking up young men in my car. And that it was one night, this dark night in Hamilton, Ontario, and we had these amazing background artists, these background actors. But given the nature of this montage and what we were shooting, they were kind of just all lined up along this dark wall, and the sort of anonymous and kind of almost like emotionless aspect of what Gacy was doing, the compulsion, really hit me in that we just had to keep shooting these little tiny, they weren't scenes, they were these little snippets for a montage of just me stopping the car and saying, like, get in, come on, how much, get in. And we just kept doing it over and over and over again. And the volume of it really kind of hit me that night. There was also another day, so our entire crew on this show was just unbelievable. We shot we were based out of Toronto, Ontario, and I mean this crew was just extraordinary, and put everything they had into it. And so our set was just unbelievable. They recreated the entirety of John Gacy's house on the soundstage with a crawl space underneath it, deep enough that you could dig in. And there was one day where I had to drag a stunt performer who was just like a corpse, so wasn't helping me at all. And I had to drag this stunt performer through the crawl space, and just that physical sensation of the effort that took to drag a human body was just another visceral experience, because doing the research and reading the scripts, you're having all these intellectual experiences, and you're making these choices and coming to conclusions about how this happened, the systemic homophobia at the time that allowed John Gacy to get away with this, and those are all important themes to be wrestling with. And then all of a sudden one day you're just like dragging a body through the dirt, and that's a different kind of pain that I experienced. That was just visceral.
Pretty physical. Gabriel, what about for you?
Wow. Trying to recall. I mean, there's so many moments that there's just so much residue. There's just a lot of that. You take it home with you, and I was fortunate enough to have my my partner with me. My wife was there in Toronto with me, and we and it was this perfect parallel of the experience to have to go home after all this. There was I had Michael and he had me, and we all had each other, whatever side of the line that we happened to be standing on. We made a pact at the dinners we would have together that we would just be each other's tether. We would within the work we'll bear that weight, and outside of it we'll carry it for each other. I just think a lot of it, there was just so many moments where you have to just imagine the sights, imagine the smells, imagine the sheer volume, as Michael mentioned. There was a day player who I worked with on another show that I did Toronto many years ago, who was beautiful, and he plays John Butkovich's father. And we had a scene where he's taking us all to task as the detectives and the police on the case, and begging and praying for me to bring back his son. And obviously, it's impossible for any of us to do that. And I think that is just this really great turning point. And I felt it. There was everything that happened before that scene and everything that happened after. And I felt this switch turn on for the character and what his responsibilities were, and to whom he was serving, and what it meant, what it would mean to try to work as diligently as possible to identify as many of these young people as he possibly could. And that was work that carried on for 2 decades, you know, and that's pretty incredible. What Tovar, the man, the real man, was able to continue doing as a consultant and as somebody who would offer up as much of his personal experience to help light the path for others to protect these, to simply protect, you know.
And Patrick, I'll bring it back to you. You know, having first written it and now then bringing it to life, what moment was the most challenging for you to see delivered on screen?
I'm going to cheat a little bit on the question, if you don't mind.
Of course.
I don't want to sound tough because I'm not as a human being. But so much of it is like the job, and unlike our actors who have to live in this and really embody it, so much of my work on the day-to-day on a production is helping to keep the trains moving. And so I have so many stories to share about watching them do their thing that I think was difficult to watch. But I was flying back and forth every weekend. I live in Los Angeles, and as Chernus said, we were in Toronto. So I was flying back and forth every weekend to see my family. And I have 2 sons. I've got a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. And it was very late in the production. One of like the later trips that I took home, and I was just outside playing football with my 14-year-old. We were just throwing a football around, and for reasons that I can't explain to you, it like all hit me in the front yard, where I was looking at my 14-year-old, and I was like, he was the age of the youngest victim. And when I tell you that it really walloped me, I don't know why I didn't think about it before. I can't explain why in that moment it hit me. There was nothing that happened on set that triggered it. But it just hit me, and it hit me hard. And that moment, I think, sadly, that moment in time is probably going to live with me for the rest of my career. No matter what I do after this show, like how visceral it became just throwing a football around with a 14-year-old who could have been a John Wayne Gacy victim. And he was mine. So yeah, it's a little bit of a cheat, but it's the one that I will always remember.
It's funny. I was going to go ahead.
Side note. Patrick's boys can really toss that pigskin.
They have a very big bromance going with Gabriel, both of them. So yes,
I found a ball. I had props department go to our props lockup, and they found an old vintage '70s football that we got filled up, and we threw around the lot. And it was a really great day. It was a really beautiful day.
Well,
moments of light and levity throughout all of this.
Well, there you go. I mean, I wanted to end on a lighter note, and we're going to end it there. Thank you so much all for joining us. I really appreciate it. It was great to hear you all talk so much about the show. On behalf of the Paley Center, thank you all for joining us for the special PALEYFEST Fall TV Previews conversation with Peacock's Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy. All episodes premiere on Peacock October 16th. You can enjoy more of these programs by clicking the subscribe button below. Thank you again.
Thank you, Debra.
Thank you.